Hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a great lunch, sitting relaxing to music, really just coming back into this space from the high that was this morning and from an amazing evening of engaging discussion yesterday evening. I've got stuff I want to share with you, and I'm so excited to share. Um, but first, I want to introduce myself. Hello, world. I'm Prince the Culture Keper. I am a powerful, responsible, and urgent leader. And I champion the sustainability of the world's most beautiful, enduring, and endangered cultures. I am the founding president of Goldwater Ventures. We are a cultural sustainability firm that actually works with some of the largest institutions in the world that seek to engage with our communities, right? And really make sure that I am, the table that convenes both Afro-Indigenous, Latinx communities worldwide and major companies, right? To make sure that we're getting the fair bargain of the deal. First part of this is going to be me just kind of giving a quick presentation about womanhood and femininity and culture. First, it'll be 10, 15 minutes max, but then I want to hurry up and get to the heart of the show today, which is going to be two amazing guests, amazing women who I love very much, and I cannot wait for them to share their light with you as well. So I'm going to share screen so y'all can see the cool visuals. Okay, y'all see that? Yes, thank you. Okay. So everyone, I mentioned culture is such an amorphous term, right? Like, what is culture? We talk about the culture keeping, right? And we just use the terms culture very fluidly, but culture has very important meaning, given some of my background and some of my studies, right? That culture really boils down to lifeways, right? The ways that we live our lives. In particular, these are really established lifeways categories, right? We think about the ways that we interact with the environment, particularly for food, but not just for food. We think about the technologies, the tools, the crafts that we build and make in our various cultures, right? Our arts, our crafts, our spirituality, the ways that we heal ourselves, right? Some of that is spiritual healing, some of that is physical healing. Often for us, Afro-Indigenous and Latinx communities, healing and spirituality go hand in hand. They are not separate, right? They are one. Also, we think about, right, the ways that we build social structures, right? So many of our cultures of Afro-descendant and Indigenous cultures and Latinx cultures are really like woman dominant, right? That women play an outsized and central role in terms of organizing and maintaining societal order. And then we talk about placemaking, literally the places that we settle and live, our economies, the way that we share resources among each other, and also knowledge, right? The ways that we pass on our traditions, our language. That's a totally special practice, right? The ways in which generations teach each other our life ways and the ways that we live and have always lived. So in spirituality, Jay Nicole this morning started talking about energies, right? These gendered energies. And so I just kind of want to elaborate through a cultural lens of what gendered energies are, right? These gendered energies are binary and complementary qualities that characterize natural forces, human behavior, social interactions, and even life experiences, right? At the highest level, that is the way that we can understand it. And the feminine energy is receptive, nurturing, intuitive, creative, and fluid, right? And collaborative. By fluid in particular, meaning very adaptive, right? That it's not necessarily, feminine energy doesn't always tend to want to control or dominate the actions of others, but interweaves, right, things together, and it flows toward a common goal or a result or an intention. And that really is a characteristic of what many of our cultures have deemed, right, fluid feminine energy. And innately collaborative, right? Feminine energy really seeks to include other people. And this is kind of like growing out of it also being adaptive, right? Countering feminine energy, right? You have masculine energy, which is assertive and protective and logical or systematic. It's very structured. It can be rigid, stable, and independent, right? So all of these kind of counteract with each other. And in a complete picture of feminine and masculine energies, we can really see that like they are kind of two parts of a whole. And this is not something that one people or one culture or people in a specific country believe. It's ubiquitous almost among all, indigenous and old cultures, right? From almost every continent. So the goal is balance, right? The goal is mastering, right? What you do well in your natural disposition, as well as it is, right? Balancing that with the other energy. And really, this balance between masculine and feminine, it appears even in nature, right? We think of day and night. The day represents action, visibility, productivity, strength, activity, clarity. And then we have the night, right? Which is the feminine component. It symbolizes intuition, receptivity, reflection, and mystery or rest or introspection. And so in ancient Kemet, right, we have the deities Nut and Gem, right? And Nut was the sky goddess, literally, right? A vivid example of what I just mentioned. And then we have Gem, which is the earth, right? Which is on the ground. And it's interesting that Gem is particularly viewed as being smaller always than Nut, right? Nut is the sky that pretty much englobes the earth. And then you have the earth, which is only, the land is only 30% of the world, the globe, Earth's surface area, right, is in green and is typically smaller, right? You also have, right, water and fire. Water tends to represent the feminine energy, right? It symbolizes adaptivity. As water flows, it takes the shape of what the container that it is poured in, right? It represents healing and fluidity. But you have fire, right, which is the masculine component. It represents passion and transformation and dynamism. And we see examples of this in Yoruba culture, right? The goddess of the water or sea is Yemaya. And then her husband, right, Aganju is the god or the deity of volcanoes or fire or destruction, right? So we see even in this that there are that yin and that yang, if you will, right? And then we also have mountains and valleys, which I think is a very beautiful example. And for example, in Incan descendant cultures, that's in cultures of like the Pacific coast of South America, you have Apus. Apus is the Incan deity of mountains, but Apus also represents like gods that dwell on mountains. Each mountain was protected by these spirits that are assumed to be masculine, many times plural, right? So each mountain has its own bunch of male deities that protect it, right? And so, for example, this rock formation that is on a slope of Machu Picchu, right, would be considered like the god or the deity that represents, right, the protectors of this mountain. Opposite of them, you have the valleys, right? Or the land, the livable land, which is Pachamama. She is the deity that represents earth in the Incan pantheon, right? Mother Earth, she represents nurturing, fertile aspects of the land, especially valleys. And she's the goddess of fertility, agriculture, and earth itself, right? This kind of providing for us. And Pachamama represents receptivity, growth, and subsistence, because oftentimes people don't build civilizations and cities on mountains. They build them in valleys, right? And so really that is kind of the ancestor of urbanization, according to the Incan legends, is the presence of valleys that make life possible for us. And I really love, for those who know ancient Egypt, right, the story of Isis and Osiris, but I really want to pay attention to Isis here, right? Osiris is only here for understanding of the story. I won't give you all the entire myth, but this is one of the oldest myths in the world, right? That comes from an African civilization. And in this story, right, of course, you have two sets of siblings at this point, and as the gods continue to proliferate. They are siblings, but they're also married. And essentially, Osiris's brother sets a trap for him and sets out to kill him, right? So he dies and he's trapped in the underworld, and he'll be trapped in the underworld until he was dismembered. So he had to get all of his body parts in one place in order for him to come back to the land of the living. Okay. So his wife, Isis, was the one that travels throughout the world. She uses all of this ingenuity, right, to put his body together twice, but was not able to, right, fully member the body. So he's depicted as being a dark color because he is the god of the underworld. He is trapped in the underworld. But the story of Isis and how she maneuvers in different palaces and travels the world and builds boats and goes to all ends of the earth to remember, right? To put her husband back together, origin of the word remember, right? To piece back together. She remembers her husband, and it is her petitions, her prayers, her love, her evocation, and her words that bring him back to life in some way. And she travels between the underworld and the overworld, right? Essentially to be with him. And we see this is a great example of the story as much as it is about Osiris and how he was one of the first pharaoh, right, in the world. It is also about one of the first queen pharaohs in the world, right? In his absence, she sought to reign and exercised, right, her ways of being and stepping into a role of leadership in a very unique and feminine way, a way that invokes like emotional intelligence and logistics, right? And I would say that she mastered both her masculine and her feminine, but led with her feminine essence. And it was essentially her love that put essentially like Egyptian mythology back together, and a whole kingdom back together, and even her husband and her home back together. So really wanting to lead with this story of an example of one of the first women in history, right? Of how she mastered both essences, led with her feminine, and really saved an entire civilization, right? And so I think of the roles that women have played in society, right? Women have been deities in our spheres of cultural influence for millennia, right? Women have been governors and rulers. Women have been priestesses, right? The intercessors between the natural and the supernatural. Women are oftentimes merchants, right? More often than not, are merchants that conduct commerce and are entrepreneurs in many parts of the world. Women are caregivers, right? And I mean that term amorphously. It could be caring for their own children, caring for their communities, caring as deities, caring as governors, caring as educators, right? Women are also often farmers, right? It is the men who go out and hunt and kill through time, right? But it is the women who gather and farm and cultivate. And so women have been scientists, right? Some of the greatest architects of the ways in which we grow food and create life on land. And women are traditionalists, right? I really partner this with education, but because it is the women that have often been in charge of caring for our children. And it is through the lullabies and the story times at night, or the dinner tables and the making food, or even some of like the gossiping, right, and the chatter among themselves, that actually women are the principal continuers of culture. Doesn't that sound familiar? Women are our culture keepers, right? And I really just rest in that understanding and that knowing that women really are the heart of what culture keeping is, and at the heart of anything that we do as a firm, right? With Afro-Indigenous and Latinx descended communities. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the women in my life. In particular, I want to lift up my departed mother and ancestor, right? Mrs. Marva Ruth Albert Nay Johnson. She was first a daughter, then a girl, then a sister, one of seven, a friend, a woman, right? Maturing from a girl into a woman. Then she became a wife, and then a mother, and a matriarch, and now an angel, right? And so much of what I know and do, right, comes from her. My love of our culture comes from her. And my mother was my first culture keeper, right? A woman who would tell me stories about my ancestors, who she knew and the ones that she didn't know, but she passed the stories down and made sure that we remembered and knew the stories of our past, right? And so I lift her up in this moment, Ashe.